The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. Okay, so I have a lot to say about this book. I read this book 2 months ago or so, and it really kind of affected me on several levels. Now, I went into this book thinking that it was going to be really fun. It is about a group of housewives in the late 80s, early 90s who form a book club, and they become really good friends, and they live in a suburb, and a vampire moves into their neighborhood and just throws a monkey wrench into their whole existence. So so that sounds like a really good time, but surprisingly it had some really serious themes behind it. I was very, very impressed with the way this writer was able to weave fun and serious themes together in a very, very clever way. Which actually brings me to my favorite thing about this novel was the writing. I think this writer's really good. I really like his writing. I like his writing style. I like his writing techniques. I really thought this was a very well written novel. I was very, very impressed. And this is the only book of his I've ever read. So I am anxious to read more of his novels. I recently just picked up My Best Friend's Exorcism, which was also written by him, and I'm really looking forward to reading that to see if this is the norm for him or if this book was an exception. So yeah, that writing was so clever. One of the things he did that I really, really enjoyed was he inserted these really odd and quirky thoughts about the situations that happened in the book. Things that you would never think of yourself, or things that if you did think of it, it wouldn't be right away. It would be later when you were contemplating other things or something like that. And I would love to give you an example of this because there are a whole bunch of examples of that. However, I can't, because if I do, I'm going to spoil something. Every one of those things would spoil something that happens in the book, so I cannot give you any examples. However, they are there, and I really, really enjoyed them, and they start right away, just right away. And I also loved his theme in this book. In the introduction, he talks about how he wanted to see what would happen if he pit a group of housewives against a vampire. So I feel like he did that pretty successfully. I do have a serious issue with this book, though, which I will get to. However, overall, I did feel like he accomplished his goal. So yeah, that writing style, favorite thing about this book. I love this author's writing quite a bit. At least in this book. We'll see if that holds true for his others. The pacing, I loved the pacing of this book. There was action, but the action was not super intense, but it absolutely drug you along faster. And then the slower portions of the book were very interesting, and they did not feel like they were dragging at all, and it all weaved together to seem seamlessly. Like it wasn't what's the word I'm looking for here. It was consistent. The pace was consistent. That's the word I'm looking for. And I really did enjoy that because sometimes it is a little jarring when you're reading a book that has really intense moments and then it just drags for pages on end, and then it gets really intense again and then it drags for pages on end. That actually happens a lot in fantasy. So I was really impressed with the way he was able to keep what felt like a consistent pace, even though the book did have slow parts and more action-oriented parts. That was really impressive. Again, the writing, I'm really impressed with this author's writing. Let's see. Now, there was a moment in here that actually was legitimate horror for me. Even though this is a horror novel and there is horror stuff happening, I'm not normally affected by horror, by novel horror. Movie horror, yes, will get me every time, but in books, the horror does not bother me or cause me a moment of anxiety or discomfort. This is not a thing that happens to me. But in this book, about halfway through, there's a time jump. And at that point in the book, something happens that actually had my stomach tied up in knots. It completely and totally horrified me. It was one of these situations where it hit on my worst fear. you know. And I had to put the book down for a day, and I had to calm myself down because I was so invested in the main character. Her name is Patricia. And Patricia is a very traditional female. She is a housewife. She is a mother. She cooks. She cleans. She takes care of all of the household needs. And she's very good at it. And she enjoys that role, even though it would not have been her first choice, because she is actually a registered nurse. But she gave up that career in order to marry her husband and have children and support his career. So she doesn't resent the role. She enjoys the role, and she loves those kids, and she likes her position in life. And I really enjoyed that, reading a very traditional female who was satisfied with her role. I really enjoyed that because you very rarely read about that. The older books where the women were the housewives were always sexist, full of sexist references, and then the modern books now, the housewives are always dissatisfied with their life. They always want something more. It's always painted to be sort of this negative. If you don't work, if you stay at home and take care of the kids and keep the house, it's painted in a negative light. And then the character, doesn't want that for herself. So I just really enjoyed reading about a traditional female who enjoyed her role and that role was fine for her. And she put all of her effort into that role. So traditional female, loved it, loved that. Now Patricia, I was very into Patricia. The writer did such a good job with her character. I was very, very pleased. She's very strong, but she's not over the top strong. She's not, she is what you would imagine the thoughts and the struggle for strength and the strength she does draw from within herself. You would imagine those things as being what a real woman in her position would go through. So I was very impressed with that. However, and this was shaping up to be a 5-star read for me. I was so impressed with this book. However, about 2/3 of the way in, something happens in this book. Something that absolutely destroyed the whole, strong traditional female that he had created. I can't tell you what it is because I will spoil the book for you. But it ended up just unraveling the whole rest of the book for me. The book just fell apart after that moment. Because in that moment, Patricia, instead of drawing from her own inner strength to carry forward, he gives her something that forces her into becoming stronger. And I felt like it was a cheat. And I felt like that she should have been, the character he was painting was this very strong traditional female who was sort of the unofficial leader of her friends, and she was the one taking the reins and saying, hey, things are not right. And even though she had a lot of fallbacks and stuff, she was always able to bring out her own strength to carry on. And at the final moment, instead of her being able to draw upon her own strength to carry on, he inserted a plot tool to push her into that strength. And I was extremely disappointed. I thought, what a wasted opportunity that was. He had set her up to be the perfect, strong, traditional female, and he just destroyed it in one stroke for me. So after that, I couldn't believe in Patricia anymore. I was admiring Patricia's character, and after that moment, I was extremely disappointed. Didn't believe in her anymore as a strong protagonist. And so the rest of the book was meh for me. So that brought it down from a 5-star to a 3-star. So, but even though that moment, that was a hugely impactful moment for me. So it did unravel the rest of the book. But even so, I still think this is a really good book and that you should read this book if it interests you at all, because I really enjoyed it. I did end up giving it the 3 stars instead of the 5, but like I said, still absolutely recommend reading this book.